History's often a lie we've all agreed to believe. We like our monsters to be loud, and we want our cursed objects to announce themselves with tragedy and fanfare. We look at the Hope Diamond and we see a celebrity, a killer that demands attention and ruins lives in the bright flash of a camera bulb. But real evil's rarely so noisy, and true terror is almost always quiet. It's bureaucratic, it's efficient, and it hides in the silence between a question and an answer. Tonight, we aren't talking about a curse that kills you by accident or bad luck. We're talking about a stone that watches you die on purpose. They call it the Spanish Inquisition Emerald, and if you search for that name today, you'll find a glittering necklace in a museum in Washington, D.C. It's beautiful, it's massive, and it's a complete lie. The real story belongs to a different stone, a much smaller stone that sits quietly in a glass case in London. This is a stone that wasn't worn by a queen or a princess, but by a monk in black robes who held the power of life and death. This is the story of the monk's secret, and to understand it, we have to peel back the layers of marketing to find the blood underneath. Let's start with the illusion you'll find at the Smithsonian. Imagine walking into the National Museum of Natural History, where the air is cool and conditioned, and the lights are dimmed to protect the artifacts. You're surrounded by the chatter of schoolchildren and the shuffle of tourists, and you approach a case to see the Spanish Inquisition Necklace. It's impossible to look away because 15 massive Colombian emeralds hang in a heavy, decadent loop. The largest is 45 carats, a deep, verdant green that looks like a forest trapped in glass, surrounded by 374 diamonds from India that encircle them like stars. It looks like royalty, and the plaque tells you it belonged to the Spanish court, while stories whisper that it graced the necks of French ladies who danced in Versailles while the peasants starved. It has the weight of history and the glamour of a lost age. But the name is a total fabrication invented in 1947 by an American jeweler named Harry Winston. Winston was a genius, but he was also a salesman who knew that a necklace is just a necklace, but a necklace with a name is a legend. He looked at the deep, brooding green of the emeralds and the old-world cut of the diamonds, and he invented a story to sell them. He christened it the Spanish Inquisition Necklace, because the name sounded dangerous and romantic, adding a layer of gothic horror that made the diamonds sparkle just a little brighter. He sold that lie to a Maharaja who bought the myth, hook, line, and sinker. There's zero historical proof that this necklace ever touched the Inquisition, never felt the heat of the auto da fe, and never hung around the neck of a confessor. It's a ghost story invented to sell a product, so let's sweep the diamonds aside and turn away from the bright lights. We must go to London, to the Victoria and Albert Museum, to a quieter room where we can find the truth. It's small, it doesn't glitter like the necklace, and it seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. This is the Spanish Inquisition Emerald Pendant, and it wasn't a piece of jewelry meant to make a woman feel beautiful. It was a badge of office, a symbol of authority that signaled the wearer was doing God's terrible work. The object is an egg, a single large Colombian emerald that's been hollowed out. That's a technique that requires immense skill and immense risk, because to hollow out an emerald is to invite it to shatter. Emeralds are brittle and filled with internal tension, so one wrong move and the stone explodes. But the artisan who made this didn't fail, and they encased the emerald in gold and enamel. If you look closely at the gold, you'll see a specific pattern of black and white. These aren't random aesthetic choices. They're the colors of the Dominican order, the order of preachers, also known as the Black Friars. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the Dominicans were called the Dominicanes, or the Hounds of the Lord. They were the intellectual muscle of the church and the architects of the Inquisition. This pendant wasn't worn for vanity, it was worn to signal piety by members of the Holy Office. Imagine a man in a black habit standing in a cold stone cell, calm and educated, speaking softly while this emerald hangs around his neck. It's a green eye staring at the accused, a relentless observer of their confession. The back of the pendant reveals its true purpose with symbols that leave no room for interpretation. There's a green cross, which was the symbol of the Inquisition itself. There's a sword, representing the punishment that awaits the unrepentant. And there's an olive branch, the symbol of reconciliation. But that reconciliation came with a heavy price. Confess and you might be saved, but remain silent, and the sword falls. The emerald was likely a votive offering given to the Virgin of the Rosary, the patroness of the Dominicans. This is the monk's secret. They took a stone that was born in the chaos of the New World and bound it in the rigid order of the Old World. They took a gem that was worshipped by pagans and turned it into a weapon of the church. But where did the stone come from? To understand the blood on this object, we have to leave the cathedrals of Spain and travel back to the source. We're going to Colombia, to the Andes Mountains in the year 1537. The Spanish conquistadors are pushing deep into the territory of the Muzo people, and they aren't looking for God. They're looking for El Dorado, and they're hunting for the green fire. The Muzo mines are legendary because the emeralds here are different, darker, more intense, with a glow that seems to come from within. The indigenous people believed the emeralds were sacred, the tears of the earth or the crystallized souls of the forest, and they fought to protect them. The war lasted for 20 years, a war of extermination where the Spanish had steel and gunpowder against the Muzo's poison arrows and knowledge of the terrain. Eventually, the mines fell, and the emerald in the monk's pendant was torn from the earth by enslaved hands. It was washed in rivers that ran red with the blood of the people who once worshipped it. Gemology tells us the story that history books often omit, because when we look at this emerald under a microscope, we see its internal world. We call it the jardin, or the garden, because Colombian emeralds are full of inclusions. You'll see tiny fractures, bubbles of gas, and crystals of salt trapped inside. These are old mine emeralds, soft and imperfect, unlike the clean stones we prize today. The Inquisition emeralds were often treated with cedarwood oil, which seeps into the fractures to hide the flaws. It makes the stone look whole when it's actually broken, which is a perfect metaphor for the men who wore it. The church took these stones and claimed them for God, saying they were purifying the wealth of the heathens. Torquemada, the Grand Inquisitor, was a Dominican. We don't know if he wore this specific pendant, but men like him certainly did. These were men who believed that torture was a form of love, and that burning a body was the only way to save a soul. They wore the wealth of a genocide around their necks while they condemned their neighbors for lighting candles on a Friday night. This brings us to the third part of our story, the shadow that lived alongside the emerald. While the Inquisitor wore the emerald, there was another symbol hidden in the darkness. The Inquisition was obsessed with the Conversos, Jews who had been forced to convert to Catholicism, but who secretly kept their faith. They lived in terror because a single mistake could lead to the stake. If you bought clean meat from a butcher, you were suspect. If you wore a clean shirt on Saturday, you were suspect. They needed a way to hold on to their identity, and they needed a secret of their own. This is where the butterfly necklace comes in. It looked like a simple piece of jewelry, a pendant in the shape of a butterfly that seemed innocuous and decorative. But it was a transformer, a piece of mechanical genius born of desperation. If you knew the secret, you could manipulate the wings. You could fold the bottom wings up and the top wings down, and suddenly the butterfly was gone. In its place was a Star of David. This was the victim's counterpart to the monk's emerald. The emerald was a symbol of power that screamed its authority, while the butterfly was a symbol of survival that whispered its defiance. The emerald was heavy, made of gold and stone, while the butterfly was light, made of silver and hinges. One was worn to intimidate, and the other was worn to remember. So we returned to that glass case in London to look at the Spanish Inquisition Emerald Pendant. It's easy to be distracted by the gold and the craftsmanship, or by the way the light catches the green enamel of the cross. But you must look deeper, right into the stone itself. Science tells us about 3-phase inclusions. Inside a Colombian emerald, you'll often find a tiny jagged cavity. Inside that cavity, there's a liquid, and inside the liquid, there's a gas bubble. And inside that liquid, there's also a tiny cube of rock salt. Solid liquid gas, a 3-phase inclusion. It's a microscopic time capsule. That bubble of gas is the atmosphere of the Colombian jungle from 50 million years ago. That water is prehistoric rain. The emerald is a witness that trapped that moment in time long before humans walked the earth. It existed long before the Spanish ships appeared on the horizon and long before the fires of the Inquisition were lit. It watched the miners die in the mud, and it watched the carver hollow out its heart to make room for a holy relic. It watched the monk fasten the clasp around his neck. It was there in the interrogation room, seeing the fear in the eyes of the accused. It heard the screams, and it smelled the smoke. Now it sits in a museum where thousands of people walk past it every day. They glance at it, read the card, and move on to the next exhibit. They don't hear the screams, and they don't feel the heat. The Smithsonian necklace is a celebrity, a story we tell ourselves to make the past feel glamorous and safe. But the pendant in London is dangerous because it's the real thing. It serves as a reminder that the most beautiful objects often hide the ugliest truths. It reminds us that a symbol of piety can be a weapon of terror. And it reminds us that sometimes the things we put in glass cases aren't just art, they're evidence. If you've enjoyed this journey into the shadows of history and want to uncover more secrets that the stones try to keep, you need to subscribe to Mystic Apothecary right now. We don't just look at gems, we look at the darkness inside them. Join us, and let's explore the history they don't want you to know.